As the last frigid gale of a 1641 London winter night extinguished the final guttering lamp in the St. James's Palace studio, the air was still perfumed with that singular fragrance, a melange of turpentine and ancient velvet. Within a shadowy chamber shrouded by heavy draperies and cluttered with colossal frames, a man with a gaunt face and fingers as slender as a pianist sat in silent repose upon a carved wooden chair. He was not admiring the priceless masterpieces adorning the walls. Instead, he toyed with a worn-out brush, his fingertips grazing the bristles that had grown coarse with age. Though only 42, he felt the flames of life, those he called color, rapidly receding into a profound and nameless darkness. He was Anthony van Dyck, the preeminent court painter to Charles I. This is a chronicle of how color freezes time and how nobility confronts the encroaching void. The genesis of Anthony van Dyck's life held none of that characteristic English detachment. Rather, it was a luminous foundation woven from the tactile opulence of an Antwerp silk shop. As the son of a prosperous merchant, he grew up amidst shifting hues of satin and damask, endowed with eyes that could discern 100 nuances of shadow in a heartbeat. Under the looming shadow of the great Rubens, he learned to make muscles pulse with life upon the canvas. Young and precocious, he eschewed mediocre imitation, turning instead to the sun-drenched marble carvings and soft, melancholic palettes of Italy. Though later heralded as Rubens's most gifted pupil, he understood that unless he stepped out of that magnificent shadow, he would never capture the lunar-like solitude of his own soul. When the London fog first enveloped his easel, he felt not trepidation, but a total serenity, the peace of a man who had finally discovered the true color of his soul. If his early travels were a pilgrimage to his artistic roots, his 8 years within the English court were a practical crucible that pushed his intellectual melancholy to its zenith. Charles I and Van Dyck entered into a mysterious psychological complicity, together constructing a phantom fortress called the ideal monarch upon the canvas. In quiet afternoons where the only sound was the friction of the brush, Van Dyck would fix his soul-piercing gaze upon the king's eyes that were perpetually filled with confusion and a quiet pity. He devised the hue known as Van Dyck brown, a tone as warm as autumn leaves yet tinged with the scent of decay. In that hour, he was the most lucid craftsman in London, meeting every whisper of scandal with silence. This radical focus rendered him like a solitary lighthouse amidst the rising tide of upheaval, flickering perhaps, but refusing to be extinguished. The summit of power in the eyes of a painter is often manifested as the absolute freedom of the brushstroke. Yet, as Van Dyck attained his mansions and throngs of servants, he realized that he had gained not just stability, but a void born of seeing through the vanity of splendor. He discovered that the elites who squandered gold at banquets possessed, in moments of private scrutiny, a weariness heavier than that of any refugee. This transition, returning from depicting glory to perceiving solitude, was fraught with intellectual struggle, yet it endowed him with a nearly transparent, chilling composure. In his final letter to his homeland, he wrote, "I once believed I was painting for a dynasty. Now I find I am merely searching within the crevices of a vast desolation for a point of convergence where the soul no longer falls." This expansiveness, born of witnessing the rise and fall of worldly desire, became the hardest armor of his twilight years. The final days of Anthony van Dyck were spent in a state of profound solemnity and a silence illuminated by the radiance of a sage. At the dawn of December 1641, the fine London rain fell soundlessly. By now, Van Dyck's body had grown exceedingly light, his once resplendent silk robes hanging loosely upon his fragile skeletal frame. He understood that the fate of Charles I was drawing to its close, and that he, the painter of the dynasty, would likewise be buried in the dust of the era. In his final moments of lucidity, he declined every offer of sanctuary, requesting instead that his pupils carry him to the window. There, he took one last look at the grey mist drifting over the Thames. He closed his eyes, and with those hands that had grasped 10,000 colors, he folded them over his chest in a final arc of restraint. Thus, the era of Baroque art known as the English sunset, officially closed amidst a steady, echoing resonance. Even today, the name of Anthony van Dyck remains the sole sanctuary for many a restless seeker in the dead of night. What he left behind was not a triumphal column piercing the heavens, but a spiritual template for self-restraint. He teaches us that even if the entire world besieges you with upheaval, the order within your heart is governed solely by your perception of truth. He was one of those rare figures in history who truly transcended the boundaries of nations and status, maintaining absolute lucidity amidst absolute shadows. Beneath the site where he once stood, now covered by the neon of modernity, he remains in a posture of eternal contemplation, seemingly still soothing this increasingly restless and anxious world. His silent vigil for the setting sun has crossed the boundaries of geography and time, living on in every soul that yearns for reality and the unknown. The saga of Anthony van Dyck thus draws to a slow close amidst the fading cadence of the London rain. He was never an opportunist who bartered art for fame, he was merely a weary soul who steadfastly refused to compromise with mediocrity. He reminds us that no matter how mundane your life may be, or how deep your distress, inner tranquility is your only true and eternal sanctuary. Just as he sat through the coldest winter nights, clutching a guttering candle to find a fulcrum for existence within the void through the tip of his brush. Perhaps you, too, are navigating the uncertainties of life at this moment. But believe this, in every life, there exists a silent season, a private space for dialogue with the self. May the serenity and vastness of Van Dyke become the softest feather in your dreams, carrying you toward that most peaceful and expansive shore of the inner soul. Good night.